Okay, so hello everyone. This is the third workshop where we're going to be looking at shaping your work and then actually starting a site. We had someone coming in from a creative studio in Santa Cruz. Unfortunately, they are working in a professional design field and they had to go to Florida for a photo shoot. Uh, um, so we're gonna revise things a little bit with that. I'm just jealous of that person because yeah, that sounds like a fun project. And so we're just gonna be revising things a little bit. So instead of having another person's input, looking at folks who have sites that are potentially in progress, I think that might be something that we could do in the future. And I think that I can definitely work with these folks to try to set that up again and to try to bring in a couple more professionals. But I do think that for this last project, or sorry, this last workshop, it would be a good opportunity to take everything that we've been talking about in the previous two and try to bring it all together. And I think that going through these workshops, this is the first time I presented them in this format in terms of being remote. And so I think that as we were working through things, I was also understanding how the content was coming across and making additions and trying to potentially change the focus of things just to make it as effective as possible for everybody. So I know that in the first workshop, we were looking at shaping a story and looking at how folks can start to think about their work from a narrative perspective and thinking about your role as an artist or a designer or a creative, and how that your role and your vision as that creative person can shift and really influence the way that you present your work. And so we were looking in that first workshop about how to infuse your portfolio with that story and how to use your portfolio to tell the story of both your work and then also yourself as a creative person. So that was in the first workshop. And then the second workshop, we were looking at a more technical side, which is platform selection, looking at all the different options for working with essentially a template system. And that's a really important part of the portfolio process because there are so many out there. And I think it is important to be able to know what all the different features are of each of the platforms and to understand how they're perceived in the larger industry. And I think that just having that overview can be really helpful. And just remembering back to when I was first working on portfolio sites, there were a lot less options for platforms. And in some ways that made things a little bit easier. And now the more of the issue is that there are so many options that it can sometimes feel overwhelming to try to navigate through and to understand the differences. So at the end of the last workshop, after going through different aspects of platforms, looking at how they work, looking at some of the different levels, introducing some of the criteria that I suggested as things to consider when selecting a platform, I had folks just start thinking about the platforms, looking at a couple of different options, and then to narrow down that list. And then today, what we'll be looking at is once we have that story done, once we have a platform or a couple of platforms that we're going to try to use, and we have those decisions made, it's then looking at the work that you have available and the work that you have maybe haven't totally documented yet, but is easy to document. And then to just looking at all those three things to actually bring that work into a site and seeing how that process works. And so we are going to go through first looking at how to basically set up and organize the work and how much work you want to be putting onto your portfolio site and how much you want to be featuring on that site. And then we can kind of go through a step-by-step process of actually looking at how that process, how that implementation process and that building process might actually work and look with a chosen platform. So I wanted to go through those three goals with everybody. And let me share my screen now. I'll go here. and share, and then let me just have to work with all my multiple screens right now. So thank you for your patience as I'm trying to find the chat and everything else that kind of gets mixed around once I move on to my second monitor. So let me grab those. Okay, yeah, so I can see the chat. So if folks are having questions as I'm going through the workshop, then let me know, and you can definitely send them through chat, and then hopefully one of the co-hosts can let me know if I'm missing something. So feel free to give me a little heads up. Okay, so looking at shaping your work and actually starting a site, and then hopefully at the end there'll be time. Those of you that have draft sites, I would be happy to take a look at them as well, and it can be something that we can look at more one-on-one, or it can be something that you might, that if you want to, you can benefit from bringing it to the group, and we can look at it that way as well. Okay. So I guess I just went through the recaps. So we have this idea of a portfolio approach that's story-driven. So thinking about the story behind the work and the creator and how you are going to be presenting that story. Then we have the platform selection. This is kind of like the technical side of things. It's important to consider and test a range of factors when selecting a platform. So some of the criteria I was talking about last week, customization and control, editing ease, responsiveness. So how easily it can go from a desktop design to a mobile or a tablet design. The different media options and integration. So is this something where it's easy to embed YouTube and Vimeo videos? Is it something that allows you to embed a lot of SoundCloud files? So those are all things you want to be considering, especially in terms of what type of work you are going to be presenting. Template variety and the overall design, and then also price and support. Those are all things that are important to think about when selecting a platform. And so this is the kind of final pre-build step, and it comes with shaping your work. So we've decided on our story, and we have that, or we have at least a working draft. We have the list of 1 or 2 platforms that we want to try out that seem to fit our general needs and are things that we feel comfortable working with. And now we need to think about the work. And so that's all that content. And that is, of course, the priority with a portfolio site. You know, it all comes down to the work. But as we have been talking about the last couple of workshops, the way that work is presented is important as well. So this is, I think, a really helpful exercise when you get started, because this is, I think this is where at least I have gotten stuck a lot with thinking about portfolios, is that when you're in progress and you're working as an artist, you're a student, you're constantly producing work, you're constantly working on projects. The idea of then shifting that into a portfolio site where you have this idea that the portfolio site has to be finished, or you have to have all of your work on that site. I think it can become very overwhelming very quickly. And then another thing that I think happens is you're in the middle of a project and you're like, oh, this is going to be the best project. So I'm not going to start my site until I'm done with this project. And so you finish that project, and then you're very tired afterwards because you haven't been sleeping in like 4 weeks. And then you take a week off, and then you start another project, or you start another quarter, and then you're like, oh shoot, now this project is the one that I need to put on the portfolio. So that is, I think that it's just because right now, especially all of you are working really hard in your courses, you're all producing creative works. It can be hard to then try to think about the portfolio end of things, where there's this kind of myth that the portfolio has to be totally finished and there's this completion timeline. So I think it can be helpful to just think about the portfolio as something that's going to be constantly changing and growing as you are also constantly producing work. And so that way you can think of it as something that is just another project, where As you're completing work, you're deciding, is this project something that I'm going to put onto that portfolio? I have an existing archive of my work. This is what I'm currently presenting. And then as I'm finishing things, I'm going to move it on onto that site. And that site is going to continue to grow. And it's going to continue to be dynamic. And it's not going to be this like, this is finished, this is complete now. And it's not going to be finished again until I have everything that I have finished working on that site. So thinking about these things as dynamic, kind of dynamic archives of your work, and also just a way of talking about your work as it's in progress. So when you're thinking about your work, number one question, what do you have? What do you have finished? What is in a digital format file that can be easily uploaded? So thinking about images, videos, and audio. So you have lots of visual artworks. Are those, if they're physical artworks, are they photographed? If they're sculptures, do you have them photographed from multiple angles? If you have a lot of digital artworks, are those exported as JPEGs or as PNG files? Those are the types of files that work best in an online format. You can't just upload Photoshop files or Illustrator files. So you have to think about, not only do you have those projects done, but are they in a format that you can then easily translate into a portfolio site? And then once you have that list, think about what you have that you can easily document. So let's say you have a series of sculptures, and you haven't photographed them yet, but you can, because they're there. You have them in your room, or you have them in your studio. You have a camera. You have a way of setting up lighting so that you can capture them and photograph them, and then you can upload those to the site. So thinking about, you haven't done that last step, but at least you have those things, they're in your possession, you're able to quickly photograph them. So that's kind of the second list that you want to be thinking about. And then the third list, and also I think that this is something that really hangs up a lot of portfolio sites. And again, I'm speaking from my own experience as well. What is missing and unfinished? So this can include projects that are in progress. So things that you're working on, and they're not done yet, but you would just want to think about that and like create that space when you're thinking about your work. That work falls into a category. The other type of work that falls in this category are completed projects that don't have documentation, that are not easy to document. So this could be things like performance-based live action games, things that require multiple participants, and that right now can be hard to, especially right now, can be hard to reproduce and in order to document. Things like interactive installation artworks. So these are kind of like the projects that you have, and you have created them, but it's going to take a little bit of effort to document them. So looking at how many works kind of fall into this can also give you a sense of moving forward as you're working on projects and as you're creating things. It is really helpful to try to remember to document them as they're happening. And I know I have my favorite story about this is a horrible mistake that I made. When I was in the Danon MFA program, we had our first open studios, and for some reason our cohort just like really decided that was going to be a big deal. So I don't think I slept for about 2 weeks, and I created this whole big installation that had like a screen that was hanging from the ceiling. And then I had all these projectors that were projecting onto it that I had also had to hang from the ceiling. And then I had this tent behind it, and there was this whole interactive space, and it had this audio component. And if I had remembered to film that would have been really great for my portfolio, but I didn't. Partially because I was so tired. I just ended up actually falling asleep in the tent for a large part of the actual open studios, but that's okay. Anyway, I had a couple of photos, and my friends had taken a couple of photos, but just losing that opportunity to document it, I have never actually been able to fully capture that work to the degree that I wish I had, because given that space, it was just that setup, took weeks, and I don't have access to that space anymore. So learn from my horrible mistakes, and just especially, once we're back in person, um, and especially if you are working with groups of folks even now in different settings, you just want to make sure that you are documenting your work. If it's things where you have people that are interacting with it, and this is, these can be tabletop games, these could be interactive sculptures, these can be physical games, these can be public art pieces. If you ever have that type of interactive element, where it's either the viewers are interacting, or you have an audience, or you're working with a space that that you aren't going to have access to, just make sure that you're taking lots of photographs, lots of video, and you're really getting that documentation of different viewers and audience members and users working with those and interfacing with those creative works. That is documentation that is really important for interactive works. And it also is just, it's the thing that's, I think, really hard for artists and designers, especially because so much focus goes into the actual installation or the actual completion of the project for an exhibition or any kind of group show, that that it is just, yeah, like you really want to, it's so easy to forget to do that, but you really want to try and remember. So after I made that mistake, I asked my friends, I was like, never let me do that again. And then I also asked them to just help me remember, and then to take photos too. So yes, good things to remember. But anyway, so there might be an option to be able to redocument this or recreate this, but you want to keep that container. You want to remember, what works do you have that you have created them, and they are something that that is a part of your creative portfolio, but you just don't have the documentation. There can be ways to try to at least supplement with something. And you also just want to make a space for it within your portfolio site in case you ever are able to redocument something or reinstall something. Okay, so this is a great opportunity now while we're sitting here. So just thinking about making a list of the existing works and projects that you would like to include in your portfolio. So you want to classify each of them into the above 3 categories. So what do you have right now? What is in a digital format? What do you have that you can easily document? That's number 2. And then number 3, what have you created in the past, but you just don't have the documentation, and it's going to be very difficult to produce that documentation. So I'll take about 5 minutes and let folks put those into lists. And then we're going to do something with those lists in another 5 minutes. So, and while you're working on those lists, feel free to ask questions or send any questions to the chat, and I'll mute myself for now. I think we can do that somewhere. Yes, here it is. Okay, so as folks are finishing those lists up, and so this might take some folks longer depending upon how much work you have, and as as folks are finishing this up, I want to speak to that as well. So it's never I want to encourage folks to start building out portfolios, even if you think you don't have enough work. You can build out a portfolio with even just one or two projects, and it's always a good place to start. And as you know, as you add works and as you maybe explore different areas of visual creative arts, you might be adding different ways to organize it, and that might be changing up the navigation. But if you're really focusing on the story, you can tell an interesting story even if you only have one or two projects. So that's another kind of misconception that happens a lot with portfolio sites, is like, oh, I can't start it until I have a huge body of work. It actually can be helpful to start with a smaller group of projects and work samples, because you're really able to fine tune the portfolio to fit those interests and to fit maybe those areas of focus that you have. So it is okay to be starting with a handful of projects. So now another 5-minute exercise. Right now, pulling from the works and projects, you have listed a number 1 and number 2 only. And this also, if you have anything that's in progress in number 3, that you can also include that in here, because as you know, you might not be finished with something, so it's technically, missing, or you don't have it in a completed form. But you'll also find that as you're get more used to continually updating a portfolio site, and as you start to view that site as a more dynamic kind of living site, then you can start to see how even a project in process, once you finish certain components of it, those can start to be updated and integrated into that site. And it also depends on how often you are uploading content. But if it is something where you're doing a lot of social media integration, or you have some kind of blog, then what you're doing with your site, what you're doing with projects, things that are currently works in progress, that can be great content to put onto your portfolio site, or to post through social media, and then have that also running through your site. So with this list, we're going to be organizing now the works that you have listed, and then someone. Okay, I'm just checking the chat really fast, but it looks like, yeah. So we're about to go over this, yeah. So once you have that list done, then you want to think about all the ways to categorize or organize these works. So how could they be organized by theme, or content, or style, or medium, or format, form, and or function? And anything that's not mentioned, it can be a very long list. So then create a series of 3 to 4 very specific categories to organize these works, and list each work under the corresponding category. And then also you can have multiple works listed under, you can have works listed under multiple categories. And so these categories, I think, is another thing that happens with, it's just kind of another roadblock when it comes to portfolio sites, because I think it can be really easy to be like, okay, well, I need to have, if I'm a print designer, I need to have posters, and I need to have flyers, and I need to have business cards, and I need to have logo designs, but I don't make business cards, or I'm not really like a logo designer. I do more things with posters. But because there's a lot of these preconceived categories, and this also can happen when you're looking at templates, or when you're looking at things that already have a set of predefined categories, you start to be like, well, how does my work fit into these predefined categories? With a portfolio site, you're able to set your own navigation. You're able to define those categories for yourself and for your own work, and for the areas of focus that you have within your work. So you can get very specific, and these types of categories can be also a way of telling your story. And again, talking about yourself and your body of work, and the ideas that you might be communicating, or the story that you're communicating to the viewer with those. So thinking about how you might organize these. And so this is going to be really different. If you are a game designer, you're going to have 3 to 4 very different categories than a photographer would have, potentially. Yes, most likely. If you are a character artist versus an environment artist, even just going more specific within the game design realm, those categories might be really different. If you are someone that does both, then you might have, for example, if you do game design, but then you're also an illustrator, there's ways to organize your work that can fit into those into different categories. And that's just going to look very, very different than it would if you were, let's say, a filmmaker and then also a game designer, or if you were just a filmmaker, or if you were a filmmaker and an audio artist. So these categories, we want them to be specific because they also are part of that story. They're a part of the story of your work that you're communicating to whoever is going through the site. So yeah, take this 5 minutes, and then I think what would be great is, I'll leave this one up, but then if as folks are finishing these things up, if you could just start listing the categories in the chat, sending out, your grouping of 3 to 4 categories. I think it would be great to see what folks are doing, how they're defining their work. That can help someone else maybe think of a category that would fit their work well. And I'll start with mine too. So let me mute myself. Okay, great. So I'll start reading these out. And then, yeah, folks, please continue to add to the chat. So we have the ones that I did, characters and lands, posters and prints, press play, and then quick animations. And then we have comics, nice and specific. Oh, okay, I'll wait for the other if they're finished. And here's another grouping. We have concept art, 2D assets, game design, and illustration. Great. So this is, all these things are descriptive. They're all talking about your work. And even just seeing these navigation menus for the audience or for the user, it's going to key them into your areas of focus very quickly. So you have personal projects, drawings, flyers, logos, and case studies. Yes, case studies, that's a great thing. And with case studies or with projects, you can always, it's a great way of kind of maximizing the potential of a single project. If you are working on a project that has multiple components, especially, so going back to the game design or any, and then even to going outside of game design and looking at like interactive media or installations, you have things like UX UI designs. You might have concept art that can be a part of a case study. And then of course the finished, some of the finished game assets. So there's so many different parts of a more involved project that you can pull out in order to focus on each one of them a little bit more. Let's see here. We have Character art, tabletop games, outdoor games, and animation. Awesome. Then by series. Yeah, so and I think thinking about series, series of what, trying to be a little bit more specific with those. It also might be obvious once that menu title is tied together with whatever work that you are presenting. Right, and then any other, oh great, here. Game mods, world building projects, thematic mechanic-based games. Okay. Yeah, so that's getting very specific. And that really tells the user what they're going to be, what to expect when they go into those sections. Okay. So going to moving on from this, and then as as we're going through things, people can continue to think about these categories. And I just before we get into the next section, as you're thinking about these categories, remember they don't have to be static. Once you decide on navigation, given how easy a lot of these templates are to edit, it can be very. It's not a huge process to have to change a navigation item or change a menu item or retitle something, or to start adding things. So when you're developing all of these types of architectures, it is very helpful to think of them as being flexible. And I think that is another reason why I'm really encouraging folks to work with these platforms, because they allow for this type of flexibility. Things like, we have Cargo, Squarespace, and Wix, and I would kind of look at those as the top 3 options. Those all allow you to really easily change up navigation, add pages, add whole sections, change the menus on the fly, and to reorganize things. You might start a portfolio site and you have, for example, just going with the last contribution here, maybe you're really focusing on world building projects at the time, but then maybe you move on to looking at to a different type of games, or you start looking at a different type of design principle, and then you start to really focus on that. It's very easy to adjust a portfolio site. You don't have to start over. And I think that as someone who has worked in both worlds, I started the portfolio sites that I originally authored in the early 2000s. I'm not going to get super specific with the year, but those really were a beast to redo things and to reset menus. So it was kind of like, okay, I built my site. Now I just have to cram all my work into these different containers, because I can't change the containers because I'm going to have to basically redo the whole site. With these platforms, they're so flexible now. It is so much easier to make adjustments and to work with this concept of a living site. So definitely don't feel locked into these categories, and continue to think about how you might adjust them as your body of work continues to grow and as you continue to produce things. So some strategies for organization. You want to categorize based on the story and the available work. So as I was saying before, these categories are descriptive. They're an extension of the story and your work. You want them to be specific. You want them to tell that story. You also want them to be somewhat accessible, in terms of, you don't want them to be so vague or maybe so out there in terms of titling that a user might get totally lost, unless you want that. You might be working with a more playful tone or style. You might be working with some things that are nonsensical. And I know that can be a really interesting dynamic to bring into interactive designs as well. So if you are trying to make things a little bit harder to access, or be a little bit more of a mystery, or be a little bit more play-like, and it kind of forces the user to take on a more explorative and curious approach, that's great. Just make sure that you're doing that and you're meaning to do that, and it is a part of your story. If your story is about presenting clear communication and making things accessible for a lot of different users, making designs accessible for a lot of different users, you don't want to be too playful with those categories because it kind of goes against your overall story. And oh yeah, this is a great question. By story, you mean our personal story, not the narrative of the project. And yes, so the personal story, and I keep saying the story, and it's really the story of your work and of your portfolio site in general. So of course, there might be some parallels between the narratives that you're exploring in a game, in a particular design or project. It's just, and those can definitely be a part of your portfolio story. You just don't need to be adjusting the categories to fit like the specific narratives that are within each of those creative projects. So, and this is a couple other pointers that I've already mentioned. Thinking about things as flexible and dynamic. They're always going to be, they're potentially going to change as your work changes or as your focus changes. You can definitely have overlap, double classifications. This is another way to work with, if you are starting out with maybe 2 or 3 projects, you might have projects, some projects are components of projects in 2 different categories. Don't worry, it's not cheating, I promise. Because I mean, I think that shows that you're thinking about your work and you're seeing its versatility. So you want to think about how multiple different components of different projects can fit into different categories. It's also looking at your own range within projects, and again, kind of breaking out of this idea that one project sits in one category. These have these defined boundaries. It's like either a logo or it's a poster. It's not both, but you can have a poster that is a logo, maybe. That one might be hard, but yes. And then also thinking about subgroups, and again, multiple components. So you might have, if you're working with something like and this is a great, so you have outdoor games or you have tabletop games, that might be something, if you have a lot of projects that fit within that tabletop game, is there a way to organize them slightly into smaller containers within that larger umbrella? That, it's you don't want to overly organize things so that someone is having to click through 5 menus to get to the final piece. But if you are finding that you have a lot of subcategories within posters and prints, then even if you're not creating a separate navigation pathway to get to that subgroup, you might want to group them all together within the larger portfolio page. And I'm going to go into that a little bit once we go into the step-by-step process. And then I've already talked about breaking project components in multiple categories, if it's applicable too. So if you're working on a group project, and also group work is a great thing to incorporate into a portfolio site, you just want to make sure to note that. And that's especially when you're working on group games or big group installations, the person on the other end, if they're reviewing this for a job, then it's definitely, you want to make sure that you're assigning credit to all your co-collaborators and your co-artists. And that's because you're working at a studio, most of the time those are team projects. And so of course, there might be someone who's the lead designer, the lead game artist, those types of things, but they also, it's all under the umbrella. So you just want to make sure to define your role within group projects and group artworks or games. And then also, and then of course give credit, say this was a 2-person project versus this was a 10-person project. You want to be specific with those types of things too. Okay, and then this, I'm just going to add these additions from the chat into here so that when folks are viewing this on Canvas, they'll have that little updated list. And then these are just some proposed things. So, and I might add a couple of these here as well, like that go outside of, because I think that we have a lot of, obviously like a lot of kind of game centered and illustration centered things in the chat. And so there, of course, there are a lot of different ways to go through things. You know, if you're working with animation, you have finished animations, you could have different types of animations, you could have looping animations, parallax. So it just really depends on what your focus is, how specific you are, and then also how general you might be. A big challenge that I have is I kind of consider myself a bit of a generalist. So I do a lot of different type of design and art. And so when I go into my portfolio site, I'm just, it can feel very difficult to create something that has a focus story because I do a lot of things in different areas. I have a lot of different art practices and design practices. So what I've started to do is just break up my portfolio site into 3 big channels. And then that allows me to kind of better organize things without it being like, here is my animations, my films, my text animations, my logos, my prints, my posters, my illustrations, my science illustrations, and my game designs, my character art. So I try to, you know, just starting with like, try to find, if you do have a wide range of works and mediums and formats, then it can be helpful to start with a couple of big categories and then to just to try to work down a little bit. All right, and then organization into the story. So we are starting with the existing work. You're of course starting with list number 1 and 2. You're creating a flexibility or possibility space for list 3. And that is of course the work that's in progress, and then just the work that you have completed, but you don't have documentation for, and it's not easy to get. And then we're thinking about navigation now. So it's the story plus the categories. So you are creating a way for the user to navigate your portfolio site. That's the navigation. You want that navigation to be connected to the story, but then also, of course, the logistical side of things. You want the user to be able to find your work and understand how that work is organized. So there is no one size fits all navigation. You're going to have, you don't want to work with a template and be like, okay, here are the options that they have. Here's portfolio, here is image gallery, here is blog. I have to fit everything into these things, or I have landscape photographs, portrait photographs, photographs of animals. I have to organize all my photos into these 3 categories. So what I do when I first get a template is I just try to get all of the default content out of it and all the placeholder content out of it. And immediately I try to retitle the navigation to fit what my categories are. So you're developing flexible navigation for lists 1 through 3. And then just, you know, as you're starting with your first build, with your first portfolio site, start with 3 to 4 categories, add if needed. If you are finding that you have a lot of works that don't fit into 3 or 4 categories, then add that 5th category, but it's great to just start with 3 or 4. Okay. And now this is from this point on, I'm going to be doing a little bit more of a kind of step-by-step with actually going from a story map to choosing a template and then showing folks how I would organize work. So before I move on to that, are there any questions about anything that I've been going over up until this point?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the first one you mentioned for portfolio sites? I think you said it was cargo. Is that it?
Oh yeah, so it's a cargo, and then cargo, Wix, and Squarespace. Those are the three that I would recommend looking over, and those are in the recording. Excuse me. In the recording from last week, I go over those three plus the Adobe portfolio sites, and I think there was one more. I don't remember right now. There was something else too. I looked at those platforms and I looked at some of the social portfolio site hybrid platforms like Dribble and then ArtStation. But I think the Adobe portfolio site and platform, the big issue with that, but it also could be a positive right now, is it is attached to it's forever attached to your Adobe CC, whatever Adobe CC account you're working with. So probably most of you have access to Adobe CC free access because of the pandemic through your UCSC accounts. And you have free access to Adobe Portfolio, which it's very similar to Wix and Squarespace. And it can be a really great way to introduce yourself to these platforms, and it's free because you have access to Adobe CC right now through the school, but you can't transfer those sites. So if you decided so let's say in 2 years, there's no longer free access, you can't take your site and move it to a different account. And you always also have to access that site through your UCSC account. So there might just be some issues as folks transition from student and then graduated. So those are just things to keep in mind in terms of why you might want to select Squarespace or Wix or Cargo to work with. The reason why this is a great opportunity with Adobe Portfolio is if you just want some practice and you're not planning on using or like sending out your portfolio site to anybody right now, then it can be a great way to start using all the features of a platform that normally would cost a subscription fee. So those just you want to keep those kind of larger technical questions in mind when you're choosing a platform. But Adobe Portfolio right now, you have access to it. You don't have to pay anything extra. And it can be a good way to just understand how these templates work a little bit more. Okay, any other questions? Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but it was actually really important to this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on stuff so far? Okay, great. So, and this again, looking at the platform selection, it's this balance of practical and conceptual. You want to choose a platform that is going to work for you. If you are planning on starting your portfolio site and starting to contact employers and trying to promote yourself right now, then definitely get a platform that can exist outside of your school accounts. And then if you are really limited in funding right now and you're not going to be necessarily using this to promote yourself, you're not necessarily going to be looking for jobs for a couple of years, then it would make sense to maybe get some practice using Adobe, since it is accessible right now and it is free. So you want to be thinking about the practical and the conceptual as well. How does this fit your overall story and your overall theme? And I think that the biggest thing with this, deciding on the top two, this is what I recommend, because really the only way to kind of figure out your preference and also to make sure that your preference or your preferred platforms are also going to fit your work is just to experiment with them. So what I tell folks, start with one or two, unless there's one that you just know you want to work with for sure. And then just start plugging in your work into both sites and start thinking about your navigation on both platforms and see which one works better. I did this with a couple of clients. They're trying to decide between Wix and Squarespace, and they were having such a hard time with Wix. And so they were having me go into it, and I was navigating it, and finally I was like, you know, I think you just need to shift and switch your platform, because everything that they were trying to do was easier to do in Squarespace, and the things that they didn't care about, what those are the features that were adding complexity to Wix. The only way that they were able to figure that out, or the only way that I kind of was able to know that, is because I had used both of those platforms. So that's why I really encourage folks to experiment with a couple to see which one works better for you and which one fits your work the best. And don't worry about switching platforms. And again, that's kind of why I say start with a couple. Don't go from nothing to the entire site built in to a platform before you experiment with another one. Now, that being said, if you have worked with Wix before and you love it, then just go with Wix. So that's something that is also, you know, part of these decisions. It might just be what you're comfortable with. So don't feel like you have to experiment with another platform if you are feeling really happy and supported with the one that you might already have experience with. Okay, so these are the things you need before you start plugging things in to your actual site, before you start the build. So you want to have your portfolio story defined. Those are things that we did in that those handful of sentences in that first workshop. You want to have that site map, and that was something that I presented as kind of something to work on for the week between workshop 1 and workshop 2. You want to have, of course, your work and that category list. So you want to have, and it helps to have your work organized into those general categories, starting with a whole folder of work, and just and this is just a very basic suggestion, but as you're organizing your work for uploading to the portfolio site, it can really help to name things something other than untitled one, or untitled project, or hard project. I've definitely done that before. And then you have like 20 untitled project with some weird numbers on your desktop. So as you're working on projects, it helps to start naming them at least with something that you understand, and then with version numbers, because that can be really helpful when you are trying to export things or get things documented. So I have, like, with a given project, like a poster project I'll have with a client, I'll probably do 3 or 4 versions of the same poster. And it's very, very helpful for me to have not only the version number, so I know, okay, this is the one that I started with first, this was second, this was third, but then also some kind of description where it's like, okay, this is the first one with red versus the second one with green. So it really helps make those decisions. It really helps you with the organization. And then when you're opening up your project file or your folder and you have 10 poster designs, you don't remember which one, which was the color version you want to work with, or that's which color version you want to have on your portfolio site. That's why naming things, just so you can identify them, is very, very helpful. So that's just my little plug for organization. And again, these are all just mistakes or not mistakes, but these are all just things that I have learned in 20 years of being a creative professional, because I made things pretty hard on myself to begin with. So I understand, why it's just when it's 2 a.m. and you just want to finish your project, you're not thinking about what you're naming it. Anyway, okay. Your platform option list, the couple that you're going to be working with, some additional graphics. So you can start thinking about a banner and a logo. I always think it's helpful just to have even placeholders, so you can start to see how those components would fit into whatever given template you're working with, and that can sometimes help with the eventual design of these types of kind of supplemental materials. These are the more promotional branding materials for yourself. They're definitely not, they don't need to be finalized, but it can just be helpful to have a couple of versions of that, just so you know how they would fit in, and how they would be looking in comparison to the rest of your work. And then any additional text or copy. So if you have descriptions for your projects, have that in a text file. You might not use all of it, but it can just be helpful to have that information available if you need to plug it into your portfolio site. So this is like if you had a project and you had to include like a description or an artist statement, if you had to include some game descriptions or slogans, all those types of materials, just have those in text files so that you can pull them out from that text file and then implement them into the site as needed. Okay, and so now this is kind of the step-by-step process. So first thing, you want to be looking at that story map or your site map, and then you're going to be choosing a template primarily based on, of course, the templates that are available on the platform that you're working with, and then this site map, because this is kind of the map to your navigation. So here's mine. I want the user to start with kind of the intro story. So understanding the story of my portfolio. And then I want them to see my characters and then posters and prints, because that's where the majority of my work is. And so I want to kind of feature those right up front. And then I want to give the user a choice. Are they going to learn more, go into looking at more samples of posters and prints or more samples of intro characters. And then these are going to be able to link together out in that pathway. Or they can, after kind of seeing these two options, they can instead continue down this pathway. They're going to look at this new project that I'm working at. It's this game, my game project. And so that's going to be kind of like the featured work on that kind of intro pathway as folks are first on my site. And so that if they click off of that, then they can explore that game project a little bit more and then maybe see some other interactive games that I have. And then that, of course, will allow them to see these other categories. And this is just a little fun thing that I like to have at the end, kind of at the end of like a scrolling homepage, is just kind of like a fun project. Those, the farther someone has to scroll, the less likely they're going to go all the way to the end of the page. So you don't want to bury your work down there, like your crucial work, but it can be nice to have like a little bonus or something for folks to kind of end on. And so this is going to my animations, and those are probably that's the category that has the least number of works in it, and it's a little bit less of a focus for me professionally. So, but I do want to show folks that it's there. So it's just allowing different pathways for different users to access your work. And so you might, in this situation, if you are sending, if someone is interfacing with this navigation and they just happen to come across your site, they're going to have their own kind of personal journey through it. The other side of this, if you're applying to a specific job, they're asking you for a specific type of work, you might want to send them to a specific section. So in that link, in that HTML link, you would just say, instead of saying, oh, go here and then go here, you would just send them that link to bring them into, all of your game design. Or maybe you would bring them to this new project game, and from there, the featured game that you were wanting to highlight. So that could be your case study, but then from there, they'd be able to access all of the other games in your portfolio site. So definitely want to think about giving kind of the non-specific user a way to navigate through your work in different ways. But you also, the other side of that is you want to have a direct path to these different categories for those targeted users. So those would be employers, recruiters, those types of things for very specific roles. Okay, so I'm going to, let me skip out of this now. I'm going to go here. Oh, Let me, I think I'm gonna have to move out of, okay. I'm just trying to share my desktop right now. But I think it's not showing up because, okay, let's see if that worked. Huh. It's very, uh-oh. Uh-oh, okay. Let's see. Maybe, okay, maybe I just need to do that. Sorry, I'm trying to share my desktop on my second screen, but for some reason it's not showing up. This is going to be a slight issue.
Have you tried sharing it just on the first screen?
Oh, because I'm still in the, I'm still sharing, huh?
Yeah, it says
Okay.
There's just like a black screen.
Oh, okay. Okay. It might, thank you so much. Okay, I think that must be it. Oh. Okay. So no, shoot.
Hey, Kristen.
Yeah.
Is the screen that you're trying to share up on your desktop? Because if it's minimized, you won't be able to share it either.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to share my desktop.
And it won't allow you.
Yeah, but that's, I think I can, yeah, I think I can just flip back and forth. There's just I just have the hierarchies of my files, but that's okay. I think I can use the general. I can just use this. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm trying to adapt here. All right. Where's the Zoom? Okay. And then are folks seeing the Squarespace dashboard web browser? Okay, great. And then let me bring the chat over here. And participants. Okay, great. Okay, back on track. All right. So if I switch back to this, can everybody see the sitemap now? Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So I have the sitemap, and apologies for the seeing the non-presentation view. But I have this sitemap, and then I'm going to go having that sitemap in my head. I also have a folder on my desktop that has all my work organized into the different categories that I've made. And I also have a text file in that folder that has my story, and then just some supplementary text. So what I'm trying to do here, I have my platform that I've chosen. I work with Squarespace, and I think it's a little bit easier to jump into than Wix is. It has way less flexibility in terms of customizing pages within your site. The flip side of that is that with Wix, it can be a little bit more complicated to be trying to have all that freedom to design. It adds layers of complexity that can impact the overall cohesiveness of your site. So I tend to recommend Squarespace to folks who are looking a little bit less for customization and a little bit more for ease of editing and updating. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pick a template. And so I think I'm going to start with the portfolio just to kind of narrow down those options. But if you're doing this for the first time, especially with Squarespace and Wix, or actually Squarespace and Cargo, they don't have a ton of categories for different types of templates. And there's a lot of crossover between them. So I very rarely have worked with a template that is meant for exactly what I'm using it for. And that holds true for my portfolio site, but then also things that I've done for different clients. So I'll use like a photography portfolio site for like a restaurant, and then vice versa sometimes. So it's just, you don't want to limit yourself too much, but I'm just going to do that for the ease of getting started with this right now in the workshop. So looking back at my sitemap, I'm realizing that I want to have a kind of a strong intro scrolling page. So some of these templates, you have multiple options to start with, or you basically start with like a menu system and then a single screen. But then other ones allow you to introduce a lot of work to start with. And then some of them do it with this grid view, and then others do it with like more of a scrolling view. And another way to look at these is to do these things called previews. And that kind of allows you to see a sample page and see how they might flow for that user. So this is a situation where I'm like, okay, I think that this design here would fit what I'm trying to do the most with this sitemap, because I'm able to have some info up here, and I'm able to have my main navigation up here, but then I also have this larger scrolling option on that homepage, and I want to be able to show, or at least give the user a jumping off point in all of these different areas. So I'm seeing how that these different sections could fit onto this this first kind of scrolling main homepage. So that's definitely one option. The issue with this, though, it has this kind of stacked alternating layout where you have like a big photo as the background behind the first page, and then it's using the contrast of the white background to kind of delineate these different sections. And I know that I don't have a ton of neutral backgrounds to put here, to put in these photo areas. I might be able to use a color, but that's definitely something that I would want to check right away. Now, if I'm a photographer and I have a lot of big images, background images that will work in this manner that you're seeing here, then that, I would probably jump on this site or jump on this template, because I would be able to fit that work into these areas really easily. But because I don't have those images, I might try to go back and just see if there's something that has that kind of stacked, long scrolling homepage that is working more with color as the background. So maybe I can look at this one here. Okay. So this one, I'm seeing this one might potentially work a little bit better for me, because I know that I'm going to be able to work with just background colors, and that's really what I have right now. It has a lot of text, and I think I just want to make sure that it also has some image flexibility and gallery flexibility. So that's another thing, you want to think about the type of work that you have. If I were working more with story and copy, and I had very few images, then this would also be, I would look at this and say, okay, this is probably perfect. But I also am not sure. I'm not seeing any image galleries here. So once again, I want to just go back and think and maybe look at kind of the balance between this one and then this one. So let's see if that exists. Okay. Maybe this one will work. All right, so this is this is the one that I showed at the beginning of the workshop yesterday or last week. But I think, yes, I think I will go with this one to start. Looking at this preview. Okay, I have images here. I have a long scrolling site. There's some interesting animations that are happening. So this is a very strong design. And I also know that I have the visuals that I'm working with are very, very strong. So I'm not sure if this is going to fit either, because I don't want to have the visuals that are within my work be competing with the very strong design that with this template. And so by strong design, I'm talking about the fonts, the colors, the fact that there are these animations that are being applied to these images. So these are all just things to consider, how this would work with how these visual designs kind of fit your work as you're testing them out. So let me go back one more time. And saw this one. Oops. Okay, and then, yeah, was there a question really fast?
Oh, yeah. Kristen, do you know if there's a way for users to change the color and size of the letters on Squarespace, or is it just a set design that's not negotiable?
Oh yeah, so there's definitely a way to adapt a template. And actually, I think what I'll do is I'm going to go, you can always make those changes. So there's ways to, and so I can show this actually here. So this is a template that I have. And again, this is this very strong, bold design. And so if I wanted to adjust this in my design section, I could go to things like the fonts. And so this will apply global changes across the site. So you're not able to really specify like pages, like you can't say, oh, I want this, or you can't use, it's harder to say to make pages customizations by the page with Squarespace, but it's easier to make global changes given the options that they have. So let's say I wanted this to be a much thinner font. So making that change in the site template design, it will apply that change to all of the headings. So if I save that, then it takes a minute to update. Apparently. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So you can see now that that has changed. It's changed it on this page, but it also will change it on all the other pages. So you can make these global changes. And let's say, oh, there was an error. That's sad. Let's say I wanted to change that orange color. So you can go, and let's say I wanted it just to be a little bit more, a little bit lighter. So yeah, you're able to easily make those types of changes to the entire template. It just then, it's hard to then say, okay, well, for page number 4, I want it to be green. Page number 5, I want it to be blue. Page number 6, I want it to be bright orange. So those are just, that's kind of the drawback. Wix, it's definitely easier to say this page, I want to have this background color and this font and this type of button. And this page, I want those things to be different. It's a lot easier to do that with Wix, but then it makes it harder to apply global changes across your site. So if you do decide, okay, I want to change the background colors on all my pages from orange to yellow, once you start customizing things in Wix, it's much harder to then say, now change this all back and keep this all consistent. So those are some of those choices that you want to make, and it really just depends on your preference and your workflow.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to actually go back to that construction or I think it was a carpentry. Yeah. This woodworking template, because I think that I can just use a background color for those stacked sections. And so far, this seems to be fitting what I need to, what my original sitemap is, and then also the type of work that I have. So this seems to be the best option so far. And also, I don't want to be spending a lot of time while we're in the middle of the workshop. Okay. And then this, so they'll also, another great thing about Squarespace is that they really, they will walk you through how to make updates. And I went through this a little bit last week, and I'm going to go over it a little bit more. But the two things to start with that are going to be where you're going to be making most of the changes are in your pages. And then that's how you're changing the navigation. And then you also have your design. And so that allows you to change things like the fonts and the colors and the size of the fonts and what typefaces are being used and all these different elements. So just to show that this again and how this can apply the changes across the entire site, I'm going to change my font pack. I want to go with sans serif. And let's do something really stylish. We got rock grotesque. I like this. Okay. All right. And so you see how now that's applying that typeface change to this page. But then if I save that, hopefully it saves this time. Great. It also, if I go back to the pages, it has also applied that to all of the pages. And this is working with these different aspects of style sheets and kind of global design settings that these platforms utilize. So you're able to make a change in the design section, and that applies it throughout the whole site. And it also applies it to the mobile templates. So it makes these changes much easier to make on multiple pages. Okay, and so then another thing I want to change is just the background colors that they're working with. So let's edit this. And I'm going to go with something that is, let's see here. I'm going to go with this. And it's interesting to see how these, this is, I think, Zoom and Squarespace are kind of competing for bandwidth right now. So this is, a lot of times this is a little bit of a faster process. And then let's edit this. Okay, so we have that, and then I want to edit. Come on. Trying to pull the color palette up. Oh man, all right. There are some, let's see, okay. Just trying to change this color here, but maybe I need to go in. Oh, there we go. All right, and I'm gonna have this be pink. And so this is fitting just some of my work a little bit better. And then this. All right. So we're going to say save there. Okay. And so now I'm going to go over to the pages, and we're going to start I'm just going to start to kind of update these. And so I'm starting with the home page, and that is because I'm going to try to implement these different sections from my sitemap into this homepage. And then that way I can also show folks just how this could potentially work. So I'm going to start with one section, and to just to show how you can jump to something in this kind of homepage and then go into a more detailed section. And then that way, this just gives everyone a little bit of an idea of how they can go about actually changing and implementing things. So the first thing I want to do is I want to start with this landing page. I just want to change this. I want to take away this this large background image, and I'm going to then just say, welcome to Work, Make, Play. I have my, let me have my text here. And this would make a lot more sense if I was able to show my, if I was able to show my desktop right now, but I'm basically copying and pasting from a text file. So I have my artist statement and my story statement, and I'm going to paste that right into here. So that is, I am a designer, maker, artist with a penchant for results-driven mischief making. In practical terms, this means creating designs that break down oppressive systems, telling stories that challenge expected narratives, and reimagining and rebuilding from fresh perspectives. So really short and sweet. And this is something where I maybe want this to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to come over here into my options. This is set to be like these are all predetermined styles and sizes, and you can always change these global things in the design section. So I'm going to see what heading 2 looks like. Okay, that might still be a little bit, that might be a little bit too big, but I think I'm going to go with something this big because I really want this to be the first thing that people see. And so I could also, going into that design side of things, make it so that this heading this heading style is yellow or is a different color. But I'm going to leave it as white this way, because what that does is that then applies that change to all of the pages and to all the sections that are working with heading 3. So that's just, I just want to show folks how this kind of template system on these platforms work. So you can change the text to this. Contact me. And I could have that there. You could also remove these buttons. And then the other thing that I want to do is try to adjust this background image here. I think that is in, oops. Okay, well, actually for here, I'm going to save this. Okay. So now I have, and I just need to find the background here. Okay, there we go. So I just double clicked on the background, and that allows me to change the background. So I'm going to delete that. Great. And so now I have this nice, just kind of this block, and that is something that I can change if I want to work with a different color in this. I would change it in the design for the template, but for now I'm just going to leave it because I want to move on to this area here. So I have my intro information. I have the name of the studio. I have my artist statement. And then here, this is where I'm wanting to talk about the character designs. So I'm going to have that be the first thing that someone can see. So I can say characters and lands. And this is where I have the option to have text. And this is when you can start to really adjust templates. Of course, they're giving you these default things and these are all options, but working with this kind of system, let's say I want to have an image here or a couple of images here instead of text. That is also something that I would definitely want to do because I'm working with these visual images. I will remove that. And so that removes that, that content block. And then I'm going to come over here and add in, instead, I'm going to add in this grid. And so this is a way to add in a gallery. Actually, hold on. That is not gallery, that is summary. So this is where I'm going to add in an image, and then I can go to add image, and then I have all my images here. And so I have my work and I have characters, and I can add in, let's see here, I'm going to add in one of these characters. Okay. Then, so this is also the way that that Squarespace kind of works with layouts. It uses a series of spacers and blocks. And so in this situation, I would probably want this to be a more horizontal image. Or I could have this be closer to the text, and then I'm able to kind of adjust things like the spacers. And so I'm having this, so this is starting to line up with like this section and this category of my work. And then I could then click on this and have it take you to another section. And so hopefully this is starting to make sense in terms of the way that you're able to start to integrate your work according to your story map. So let's say in this section, I would have this be, let's delete this. And then I'm going to edit this section. Oops. And you can add like a gallery in here. Okay, so I'm going to take this out of here. So then this is going to be, I have characters and lands. And so this is going to be like basically a gallery of different characters and lands. And so then I can go into this gallery and then start to make these adjustments. And so all this placeholder content, this is kind of one of the difficulties with platforms, because it kind of comes with all this pre-packaged things, and then you're just needing to import your own content. And so I have, let's see here, I have a different set of characters that I want to plug into this, and let me go with, and so this is these are kind of some subcategories that I have and subgroupings, and I'm kind of grouping these by style. And so I want them to be kind of organized within the group. And so I'm going to close that out. And so now I have characters and lands, and then I have my intro statement, and then I have this gallery for the user to explore. And then this is all relating back to this first item. So you go onto the intro story, then you're moving into the character section, and then below that, I can create another section that has an intro to posters and prints. Or if someone's really interested in something they see on the character section, they could then go, let me go back here. Oops. the Zoom bar is just causing some issues. I can't get to my tab. 1 second here. Okay, here we go. Okay. So with this, I can have this link to, and let me save this. And so I can make a, and then let me bring these down below just so they're out of the way. So I'm trying to do this quickly just to show folks how you can very quickly start implementing these changes into the site. So I'm going to add a, I'll add a page layout just because this is another feature that Squarespace has where you have a series of layouts that you can choose from. So I think I just want to go with a really general kind of gallery system. So I'll go with this, and then I'm going to call this characters. Oops. Characters and lands. And then now when you go back to the home page, you can see that we have that title page and the artist statement, and then it comes down to characters and lands, and I will probably have a little bit of description. And then you see some of the characters and lands here, and then you can click onto this, or you can go up to this navigation menu and then go to the actual characters and lands landing page. So right now, this was just again, this is kind of that, this is that dummy content or that placeholder content. And I can go in and add in. So this would be where I would be talking about the characters. And so this is where if I had that character text written, I can go in and add it in here. And let's see here, I have a little bit that I can add here. Characters from distant lands, just to copy a little bit from Adventure Time. Then I have a little bit of, oops, copy here. And then I'm going to come over here and I can edit this gallery and I can upload, delete all of those. Oh gosh. And so this is some of the work that you have to go through when you're working on these sites and when you're working with these platforms. I think, you know, getting used to the template that you're working with, there's a lot of bells and whistles and ways to streamline the process. So it just does take that kind of knowledge. So I'm going to add in all of the characters and lands that I have. Let's see. Close. Okay. And so this is starting to show the breadth of my work. And then these are all kind of organized by their style. And let's say I wanted to bring this fox image up a little bit more to the top to fit with these two images a little bit more. So I would go in to that section and I can just drag and drop these things and close. And then let me just save this so I can start to show folks how this is all kind of starting to mold together. So if I go back to the home page, and then this, you can also see how this would look in mobile. So you have that landing page, and then you can go, then you start to see these options, these characters and lands in that first part of the section. Or you could go to the menu and navigate to that option. And then you start to see those sections and then how they can be kind of organized more by subcategory, by style, or by layout. And then there's also ways within Squarespace to edit like things like the way that the gallery is designed. So if you go to edit section, you have these different gallery types. So you can go with a grid, like a simple grid. And you can also decide if you want things to lightbox. And you can change the size of the columns and the way that things are cropped. So these are all different levels of flexibility that you have to customize things. So, you know, you can't easily go in and change like the layout, like the really detailed layout of some of these, but then they're automated. So then it makes it really easy to add in multiple galleries and to have some flexibility with how they're appearing. So this is just, I just want to give folks an idea of what this looks like, how you can organize your work, and just the different things that you are able to do with these platforms. So I'm wondering, do folks have any questions? And just also kind of thinking about how you can adapt that story map and your navigation and your sections to fit with these templates, and how like a different story map. So if you want to work more linearly, and you just want to have things separated by the menu systems, and you don't want to have a lot of options on a homepage, then that, you know, keep that in mind when you're starting to look for those templates. And then maybe you could have a more streamlined homepage, and then just have the menus a lot more obvious. So in that situation, you would select that design that fits that overall story map a little bit more. So yeah, do folks have any questions just about, you know, what a little bit more how this looks? I don't want to be like having to walk through all the technical side of things, because I know that it's probably a lot to take in, but I did just want to give a little bit insight about how building out galleries looks, working with layouts, changing things in the template, and how that can be really streamlined with these platforms.
Hey, Kristen, it looks like maybe some of the students want to share their portfolios at the end of the workshop, and
Okay.
you get some advice. And then we just had one question pop up in the chat right now.
Okay.
Do you have any tips for story mapping sites and taking them to the site? I feel like that's a whole set of skills on its own, imagining the navigation.
Yeah. So that is, I think that's a great question, and it is about, you know, thinking about that story, what you want the user to experience as they're opening up the site. And as much as, and I mean, this is one of the drawbacks with these platforms, is that you get these templates that have all of these, like they're already kind of set up. So it can be very hard to like, I think it's just really easy to start trying to fit your work and to fit your story map into the default setup or the demo setup. And so that's why I say, just, you know, try to delete all that placeholder content and start with as streamlined as a set of pages and links as you can. And also, and I think just thinking about a simple approach makes more sense. That's why I was saying, you know, try to keep it to 3 to 4 categories to start. And the most straightforward thing you can do, you know, if you're just starting to work with site navigation, is just to think about, with most of these platforms, you have the main navigation list, and that is going to correspond with something in the top menu. And so if that, you know, just start there, you know, having just your categories there, and then maybe just having like a contact that would be in the footer. And then you can start, once you have those defined. So I would create another one of these that would be my animations, and then you know, the 3 or 4 others to fit my categories. And then you can start to, you know, with this homepage, I could just delete, you know, all of these sections, because you can always go in and make new sections, and then also just delete whole sections. So you could just start really simple. with these, and just have maybe 1 or 2 branching options from a homepage to start, and then you can start to build in that complexity once you have your category pages a little bit more defined. So once you have your animations and your characters and lands and your game designs and your posters and prints, then you could come into the homepage and start to add complexity. So maybe you would have a little gallery of your characters and lands here. You want to focus on posters and prints next, so you would put that in another section, and you would be able to build that option in, so it's a potential pathway for the user to go on. So they land on the homepage, they see your story, and then they see some of the work that you're wanting to feature, and then and so you can add to those features as, of course, you have them kind of developed in that main navigation. But I think just keeping it as simple as possible. You don't want to be starting a site with like 10 categories of work, because then trying to think about how you can create those different pathways on the homepage is just that there's going to be a lot of different possibilities. So so you do want to approach it just thinking about it as the user, how they're going to be approaching it if they have no knowledge of your work until they get to this landing page. Okay. Great. And then any other questions on things? And then we can start looking at different portfolios.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
For sites that have options, do you recommend actually publishing with, like, what does that insist of? If it's free options, are there ads, or what is the caveat of having a free option?
Yeah, usually with the free options, it's your domain has the so the URL has like Wix in it, or Cargo is another one that has like cargo space site in it. That's not a huge issue. I mean, I can't imagine, honestly. I wouldn't see that as being like a drawback for looking for jobs, because I think that if you're just kind of like submitting a link, a URL, I don't think any employer is going to look at that URL and be like, oh, this has like Wix, or this has cargo in it. So and judge it in a way that's different. The drawbacks with those is that just for like search engine optimization, trying to promote yourself if you are working more with just regular social contacts, and just trying to get your work out there, that is where it's nicer sometimes to have a recognizable domain. So yeah, that's kind of the trade-off there. So if it's important to have it be at lower cost, then as long as you are mostly just applying directly to jobs and submitting the URL that way, it shouldn't be a problem. But if you are trying to do more kind of general public promotion, then it might be worth it to get the domain. So that's usually one. And I think that Wix has ads. And yeah, any site that has, I think maybe one version of Wix has ads, and there might be a couple of other platforms that work with ads with their free versions. And I do think that that can be a really big drawback, because those ads just compete with whatever story you're trying to tell. And they also can sometimes compete visually with your work. So I do think that that's something that some employers, I mean, hopefully not intentionally, but it just, I think, can cause some distraction. So I would discourage a free option that utilizes ads, but I don't think that I don't think Cargo does that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and then any other general questions? Okay. Yeah, and so I'm happy to look at, let me stop my share here. And I'll definitely, I will, I will definitely try to add the links to these different platforms in the Canvas site, and everyone should have got an invite for that. As long as you registered with your UCSC email, you can't join Canvas through a Gmail account, so it has to be your UCSC. But I'll use the registration from this workshop as well, and then send it out to folks. So yeah, I'm happy we can kind of share any portfolios that people want to go over. And I could either share it on my side, or you could share it on your screen if you wanted to send a link. Okay, great. Okay. All right. Let me see if I can get in there. Okay, and then let me share this. Okay, I'm just trying to bring up the chat window. All right, and then can everybody see the ArtStation portfolio here? Great, okay. So yeah, do you want to either by chat or by voice just walk through where you're at, what you're looking for feedback on? And then I can kind of navigate through here. And I mean, I think that having someone kind of play test a portfolio can be really helpful. So I'm just, if that's okay with you, I'm going to kind of narrate as I'm going through the site. And then that can help give some feedback about, how just like a kind of general user might be interfacing and experiencing the site. And so, and just for the folks that that weren't here for last week, this is an ArtStation site. And so these are these interesting, this is one of these hybrid platforms that is both social and then kind of has a very consistent and cohesive branding and template kind of around all of their different accounts. So the positives with this is that there's like a kind of an integrated, insulated social community. And if you have people that are used to navigating this this platform, they know where to find everything. I'm someone that actually doesn't use this platform very much, so I think that is just something to keep in mind as I go through this site. And so here are the areas that yeah, great. So just some areas to talk about your story and the opportunities that you have to talk about a story when you're working with a hybrid site like this or a hybrid platform like this is, I think, probably there's a lot to do with whatever profile image you're working with, your avatar. And then these potentially the backgrounds, if that's something, are the backgrounds something that you can customize, like the top banner? Yeah, so those are two opportunities right there, where you can think about what story this profile image is telling, and then what the visual design of these banners are communicating. Is this something that you created? Can you have something that you created in these, or is it just like a general set of like images that you pull from? Those are all things like how do these fit with your work as well? And then going through here, we have your portfolio. So I'm just gonna click onto this. So this looks like some good concept work, some assets, looking at different tile sets, getting very specific here. And so this is great because this is showing a collection of the assets that you're working with. And you're seeing a good variety. What I would say, just some suggestions with this is you want to think about what's pulling the visual focus. Right now, your largest images are these, are kind of the ones that have are a little bit more basic. And I understand wanting to be able to show the texture there, but if this isn't the size that is going to be appearing in the actual game, then I would just think about resizing these. A couple other things to think about is you have a lot of contrast that's happening here with the white of the background. So you could either, and I don't know, again, this might be something where if you have a lot of lighter images, then you might not want to be working with that black background. If it's something that you can't change, then you could think about having these set up with a more neutral background, or even potentially working with transparent PNG files so that you can export and not have these borders. And so that's really going to also help with the balance that's happening where so I think these are the assets that you would want to focus on more because they have the higher level of visual complexity, and you want these to be able to shine and be a little bit larger in emphasis than things that are a little bit less detailed. So just kind of working with that balance. But overall, I think that this is a good number of images to have that are related to this one project, and they're also all coming together.
Hey, Kristen, I just want to be aware of time. So we
Yes.
are at time at the end of the event. You're more than welcome to stay if you have some time. But I just want to be able to launch the poll right now just to get a sense of everyone's input before logging off. Vicente, do you mind launching the poll for us? And then Kristen, are you going to be able to stay a little bit later, or
yeah, I can stay a little bit later, and I can also I mean, I think if people want to just have another meeting where we can go over the portfolios that a little bit more in depth all together, then that is something that we can definitely talk about too.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm going to send out the recording after the fact, so I can just get a pulse from the registered list, essentially if they need additional time. And then we'll go from there. But just so you know, I have to go to a 2:00 meeting, so I will make you host for now. And then that way you can manage the rest of the space, and we'll just stop recording at this time.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. If you could take a minute to fill out the poll. And then, as you heard, I will be following up via email to see what additional needs you all have. Thank you.
Thank you.